Hey everyone, welcome back to Brewbound's continuing coverage of how the beer industry is adjusting to the impact of the novel coronavirus known as COVID-19. My name is Justin Kendall and I am the editor of Brewbound. And as you can see, here's another view of my studio apartment. This is all of it. And joining me today via Google Hangout is Danelle Kosmal, VP of the beverage alcohol practice at market research firm Nielsen. Danelle, how are you hanging in there?
We're okay. I mean, we're 3 weeks into it. We have a toddler at home, so definitely doing the balance of finding every minute of the day to do work and take care of him. Selfishly, it's been kind of fun to hang out with him a little bit more, and so we're doing our thing, getting out and taking walks, and that's pretty much the extent of getting out.
Yeah. Are you stocked up on all your favorite beverages?
Absolutely, definitely. So it's been interesting though, the way that we've stocked up on beer, wine, and spirits is very different. I've gone to the liquor store more in the past couple of weeks than I have in maybe a year or two. And so that's been a new and interesting behavior that I've noticed of myself. And, wine, we were already stocked up a lot. So I feel like we're good there. And then beer, we've been purchasing at where we always do at the market, the neighborhood market across the street. And so we've been doing the opposite of stocking up on beer. We've been doing 6 packs at a time, which is allowing us to kind of have some variety in the beer that we've been drinking.
Yeah, you're keeping the rotation going.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. How about you?
I'm good. I've been ordering through GoPuff because that's been the fastest, at
Uh-huh.
least to get a couple of 6 packs of Dogfish beer, and I've had a bunch. I actually had a lot of hard seltzers in my fridge from just we get shipments into the office, so I've been stocked up with Truly lemonade and Press and a few others. so
Good.
it,
Good,
my
good.
mix is kind of odd right now. What are you seeing when you're going out to the liquor store, by the way? Is it packed? Is it busy? Is it, are people social distancing?
People are definitely social distancing. Everybody has their hand sanitizer. Not a lot of people. Maybe it's just the time of day that I've been going, but it hasn't been something that I've seen like terribly unusual of completely packed. But that just might be my neighborhood.
Okay. Well, you're here to talk about the scan data for the week ending March 22nd. I think this is the big full stock up week that we were all anticipating. Uh, can you help us sort of dive into that and give us a feel for how that compares to, weeks that we've seen in the past?
Yeah. So, I mean, if we start, I think it's always good to level set and start at the total consumer goods or the fast moving consumer goods level. And this past week, the data that we saw, those trends are up 58%. And then when we do a comparison of total alcohol, so beer, wine, and spirits combined, those trends are up 55%. So, I mean, we're lagging a little bit of where total consumer goods is, but really we're pacing in a very similar way. This past week, so all the latest data that we have right now is March or week ending March 21st. And so this definitely is the week where we saw a big spike. And I think it's probably going to be the week where we see the biggest spike. We'll see. This is so much is changing so quickly, so rapidly, and is such a different world than what we all know. But I really think, that week ending March 21st is where we will see the biggest spikes.
So this is the peak of, or this could be the peak of what we've seen on this whole stock up. So I guess how has this week compared to, I guess, certain weeks throughout the past? I guess I wonder about like holidays. Is this similar to a Fourth of July stock up or a Labor Day stock up, or what would you compare it to?
I think that's it. We can't really compare it to anything because we haven't really seen anything like this before. I think especially because we haven't seen anything across every single segment of beer, nearly every single segment of alcohol, that everything is up double digits. And there really isn't a comparison, I don't think.
Well, when beer, FMBs, and cider is up 42% in dollar sales for a week. That's
Mhm.
amazing. And, we haven't
Mhm.
seen that growth in economy or premium lights in what I can't even remember the last time those segments were in growth mode.
Right, right. I think it's been years. We might have had a blip every now and then where it was one week or a 4 week time period where premium lights might have been up a little bit, but I mean, it's been years that we've seen growth rates, and especially, I mean, if we've when we're talking about growth rates in the 30s, 40s%.
So, as someone who closely follows the numbers, what have been the biggest surprises so far?
There are a couple things I think that were initial surprises, but then after I took a couple seconds to think about it, I thought that makes sense. So the growth that we've seen from premium light brands. So this past week, the three premium light brands were all part of the top 5 growth brands for beer, and so that initially was a bit of a surprise. But then when you step back and think about it, people are want to buy larger pack sizes. Those brands are available in larger pack sizes. And overall, it's across total consumer goods. Consumers are really going back to brands they know. And big brands are doing well, and brands that are known and are more mainstream brands are doing well. And, for when we compare back to consumer goods, even something like branded products overall right now are really outperforming private label or store brand products, and we've seen the opposite trend in total consumer goods for the past couple of years. And so now that um, you know that we're all changing our consumption behaviors and going back to brands we know, branded products overall are doing really well.
I hate framing this in terms of winners and losers because this is such a, a terrible situation for everyone to be in.
Mhm.
But when I look at this situation, it looks like something where the larger brewers and brands are the most equipped for this moment. Is that a fair assessment?
I mean, potentially. I think there are a couple reasons why we're seeing some of the biggest spikes with those types of brands. I mean, one is what I just mentioned, that people are purchasing brands they know. And I can go back to my own social circle, and 2 weeks ago I sent a text out to a bunch of friends and I said, "What are you buying?" And how are you making that decision? And I asked, "Are you buying? Did you try something new, or did you only buy stuff you know?" And nearly everyone said, I'm buying brands I know. So that's my unofficial research. Nielsen is doing some official consumer research, and we're going to have some initial, preliminary results to share out in the next week or two. But that said, I think it just goes back to people are going to brands they know. I also think it goes back to a little bit of what I mentioned of the large pack sizes. So if we can only go out once a week or however often to go to the grocery store or any store, we want to make sure that we're stocking up as much as we can. So we're purchasing, in a lot of cases, people are purchasing larger pack sizes. It just so happens that a lot of the bigger brands are those large pack sizes. So I think that's a part of it too. And then to your point, I think bigger brewers might be better equipped for this, and so that might be a piece of it too.
And hard seltzers also appear to be built for this moment. They were up 456% compared to a week ago this year. Uh, that really seems to be a part of consumers' mix now.
Mhm. Absolutely. I mean, Nielsen's been saying for the past 2.5 years that seltzers are here to stay. They're not a fad. They're going to be a longer term trend. And I think this, secures that idea even more now. The fact that people are purchasing hard seltzers at the rate that they are, I think it just really shows us that when people are going out to the store and they're making their considerations of what type of alcohols do they want to have in their house for the coming weeks or even months, and seltzers are a part of that. I think it's one of the biggest signs that seltzers are here to stay and a regular part of what people are drinking.
Have you seen any brands go the opposite direction since this crisis hit?
Not really. I
Not
mean,
really.
no, no. I mean, I've in the way that I've been looking at brands, it's for the most part is maybe the top 100 brands in the beer category, the top 100 craft brands, and everything that I've seen, I haven't seen a flip in trends. If a brand was doing really well, before everything hit, and the time period that we've been looking at as a comparison is 13 weeks ending January 25th. So really before even the first case happened, or within the US. And that seems to be a good benchmark of how brands and segments were performing then versus now. And there isn't anything that I've seen that, a brand that was on fire then, and then all of a sudden isn't performing as well right now.
Yeah. Well, we've seen the opposite, in fact, with brands such as Bud Light, uh,
Hmm.
Boston Lager.
Hmm.
There are any number of these brands that were in decline where
Hmm.
they've seen a complete reversal of fortune.
Hmm. Hmm.
So I wonder too, though, about how this outbreak has affected the long tail. Are we seeing decline there?
No, not at all. So I mean, when we're talking about craft brands, we can look at it two different ways. Independent craft, so the BA defined craft versus kind of the broader definition of craft. And in that case, both segments are growing a lot. And independent craft is outperforming regular craft. So independent craft for the latest week was up 44%. That broader definition of craft was up around 40%. And then, we can also look at it. And a lot of times when I look at the long tail, I'll just make comparisons of the top 100 craft brands versus the rest of the craft segment. And in that case, those top 100 brands are slightly outperforming the long tail, but the long tail is still up within the 30% range. It's about 35%. So the long tail is still doing well.
This is this is unreal. It really is. And you also pointed out in the numbers the growth of non-alcohol beer. What can we attribute that to?
That's one that the first time I saw, my husband has been my sounding board in many cases as I'm looking through this data. And the first week at last week when I saw it and I saw that, non-alc was up a couple digits, he and I were talking through of like, what can that be? And so um, I think it just goes back to we're seeing a continuation of trends that were happening prior to coronavirus. So non-alc beer was up in, close to 30-40% in that time period, 13 weeks in ending January 25th. So um, we have that momentum that was already starting prior to coronavirus in the US. And I think some of those habits are translating into what we're seeing now. I looked at some consumer data yesterday, and I think it provided some interesting insight into what we're seeing within non-alcoholic beer. And when you look at consumer data, there are two ways that you can understand of how volume is growing. Either more people are purchasing it, or the people that are buying it are just buying a lot more. And from what we've seen within the first couple of weeks of March, it's that those existing non-alcoholic beer buyers are just purchasing more, and that kind of makes sense. So those people that have been purchasing it for the past year, and as we continue to see more mainstream brands and the idea of non-alcoholic beer becoming more mainstream, more people had started to purchase it in the past year. And then those that had a regular habit of purchasing non-alcoholic beer are just purchasing more of it, because we're all purchasing more of everything that we want in our houses right now.
Mhm. And e-commerce sales, they've ticked up as well. They're outpacing in-store sales growth. How much consumer adoption do you anticipate s- taking hold after this event?
A lot. I think it's really important. I think that that initial that's an obstacle of getting a consumer to make that first online purchase. And once they make that first online purchase, then they're more likely to come back. So the fact that so many consumers are kind of breaking past that initial obstacle and making that first online purchase, I think we'll start to see more and more bevel buyers coming back, and also the idea catching on that we've talked about in the past couple of years in the industry, that one of the biggest obstacles and challenges that our industry has is that consumers might not even know that they can purchase it in their purchase it online, and there are ways through click and collect or Drizzly or others that they can have access to it. Now, of course, there are lot of new and innovative ways that suppliers are coming up with, and other companies are, and the industry overall is coming up with, to make sure that online purchasing is available.
Yeah, I guess as more of these stay-at-home orders are enacted or extended, I wonder if people really cut back on that trip to the grocery store and fire off a Drizzly order or a GoPuff
Mhm.
order or whatever it is. If I don't have to
Mhm.
leave my apartment,
Mhm.
that's a good thing at this point for me. Like I
Right.
want to limit my out in the world interactions as much as I can.
And I think a lot of people feel that way. And especially if you're out of beer, and that might be, you're kind of stocked up on food. And if you're out of beer and you can order it on Drizzly, then why not?
Mhm. So, not to play spoiler alert on next week, but how are these trends holding up that we're seeing? Have we seen a slowing start to take hold in the week after the 21st?
So we don't have any of that data available yet. We don't have the data ending March 28th. We will through the weekend. And I think it's just going off of what our suspicions are and what we suspect will happen. So I definitely think that next week we'll start to see a slowing. I think everything's still going to be growing, but I think it's definitely going to be slowing off compared to what we've seen in the past week or two.
Do you think we're going to see sort of waves of, I guess, waves of purchasing behavior? Like we'll see the stock up, and then we'll see a lull, and then we'll see another stock up, and then we'll see another
Mhm.
lull. Are we going to go in sort of this ebb and flow type pattern as this goes on?
I think that's definitely a possibility. And I think that's the importance of looking at market by market data also, because as each of these the new restrictions and shelter, stay at home, stay in place policies are kind of sweeping across the country, I think each one of those markets are going to react in a different way and aligned with the timing of what's happening within that specific geographic area. So I think that we potentially will see that ebb and flow that you mentioned. And I think it's going to vary a lot by market by market.
So, for craft brewers who may not be in some of these packages that are in growth mode, and they have the capability, how should they be thinking about their business moving forward? Should they be considering trying out, a larger pack size? What should they be thinking about that maybe they're not, or that the trends are playing out into that they should consider getting into?
I think being creative and being as creative as possible to continue to engage consumers. I think social media obviously is the best way to continue to engage consumers. As a consumer myself, I want to be involved. I want to know what the brands that I buy and the companies that I like. I'm following them because I want to understand what they're doing and how they're engaging their consumers. And within my community, I've seen a lot of distilleries and breweries and restaurants be really creative in the way that they continue to engage the community in a safe way. So, can they sell things at the brewery? Can they do engage in delivery? There's one restaurant or brewery here that I think is selling popcorn because that's their way to sell food along with their alcohol that they're and so I think it just goes back to everybody's being creative, and this is the time to really flex that creativity as much as possible.
One last question on the stock up. Have we seen that go in a regional wave, where the areas that were first affected, began to stock up, or did it just sort of sweep across the nation all at once, or were there, slower adopting states and areas and regions, was the Midwest behind, the West Coast or in the East Coast, or how have you seen that play out?
I think that what we saw in the state of Washington is really interesting. Within the first, probably the second or third week of February, we saw a lull in alcohol purchasing at that time. And that's when, a lot more was being discussed about coronavirus, more policies were were being put in place. And I think people were in a very different state of mind than what the rest of the country was in February. And so there was a lull. And then by the last week of February, we saw a really big uptick in purchasing there. And that's, we hadn't seen that hit, obviously, the rest of the country yet. And so I think we're continuing to track market by market, like I said, because I think that's where we're going to see some of the biggest differences, and that it's going to be really telling.
Anything you'd like to add that maybe I'm not thinking about or we should be thinking about?
I think what we've been seeing in wine and spirits is interesting. I think that when we talk about growth rates of 42% for beer, that's amazing, and something like we've talked about that we've never seen before. Growth rates for wine last week were 66%, and spirit growth rate was 75%. So definitely outpacing the growth of beer. That said, we always keep in mind beer is a much larger category. So total dollars that beer is bringing in is much higher than the gains that we're seeing from, or about the same than the gains that we're seeing from wine and spirits combined. But that said, the growth trends in both of those categories have been really interesting, especially when we're talking about something like wine, where in 2019, it was the first year in a long time where it essentially was flat and didn't see growth. The biggest growth drivers for each of those categories are also interesting. Wine, it's the large sizes. So boxed wine is up. The 3-liter premium boxed wine is up like 135%. Even the 5-liter boxed wine, which for the past couple of years have been in decline, it's up really strong double-digit growth rate. So it just goes back to the idea that people want to make sure that they're well stocked in their home. And then spirits, a couple interesting things. Ready to drink cocktails. That's something that we all know have been growing over the past year. They still are doing really well. So that's another event I think that we've seen that was pre-coronavirus that's going to continue into like this new normal, I think. And then even some segments like gin, which is performing really well. And I think that's been a bit of surprise for many in the industry.
Well, you mentioned boxed wine, and I won't lie, I do love a good Boda box.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So, and as far as the patterns for stock up on spirits or wine, do you see any trailing off or divergence from beer as far as how consumers are, stocking up on those items?
So that's something that that's part of the consumer study that we're working on right now, and some reports that will be available this week, actually, so we can understand, how beer buyers are purchasing other segments and spirit buyers are purchasing other segments. I think that we will continue to see, though, if you were somebody that purchased beer, wine, and spirits across the board before coronavirus, you're going to be somebody who wants to make sure that you're well stocked with beer, wine, and spirits in your house during all of this.
Yeah. Well, we'll look out for that report. And thank you so much for taking the time out this morning.
Yeah. Thank you. Take care. Be safe.
Same to you.